Well, 5 Michigan officials have been charged with involuntary manslaughter in the case surrounding the Flint water crisis. An investigation by the state's attorney general found these officials were aware that they were poisoning the people of Flint. However, they did nothing to stop it. Here's RT's correspondent Ashley Banks with more.
Nick Lyon, the highest-ranking member of Governor Rick Snyder's administration, is among those who have been charged. This comes after Michigan's attorney general led an investigation into the Flint water crisis, revealing that an 85-year-old man died from Legionnaire's disease. Lyon is the director of the Health and Human Services Department, and he's being accused of not alerting the public to a Legionnaire's disease outbreak in the Flint area after the city's water supply was switched 3 years ago. In 2014, Michigan officials turned to Flint River as a water source in order to cut costs. For 18 months, as residents in a city made up of mainly low-income families and minorities consumed untreated water. When residents began complaining about the coloring and foul taste of the water, the Civil Rights Commission's investigation found that the water was then tested and continued to be tested for over a year. Even after the results yielded, the water was tainted. According to the commission, state officials didn't question the water quality, but instead questioned the test, stopping any actions that would have protected Flint residents. As a result, 12 people died from Legionnaire's disease and a high lead levels they were found in children's blood. In addition to the involuntary manslaughter charge, Lyons is also being charged with misconduct in the office. The Attorney General said, quote, Mr. Lyon failed in his responsibility to protect the health and safety of the citizens of Flint. The families of Flint have experienced a tragic health and safety crisis for the past 3 years. If Lyon is convicted, he will face up to 15 years in prison. The other 4 people facing involuntary manslaughter charges are Darnell Early, Flint's emergency manager, when the city used the contaminated water; Howard Croft, he ran Flint's Public Works Department; Leanne Schechter-Smith and Stephen Bush, who were both state environmental regulators; and Dr. Eden Wells, the state's chief medical officer, was charged for obstruction of justice and lying to an investigator. After the charges were announced, Representative Dan Kildee said he supports the ongoing investigation and hopes that everyone responsible will be held accountable for what happened to the people of Flint. In Washington, Ashley Banks, RT.
Well, to discuss this further, let's bring in attorney Sarissa Montague to break this down for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarissa. Just to kind of recap what Ashley said. So we know that Nick Lyon was the highest ranking member of Governor Rick Snyder's administration to be part of this criminal investigation, and he's now facing manslaughter charges for failing to alert the public about an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in the Flint area. So in your eyes, was he legally responsible to make this information known? And also, what about allegedly obstructing university researchers who were studying cases linked to the Flint River? I mean, if true, how serious is that?
Well, certainly he's facing some serious charges right now. In a criminal case, there are very specific elements of crimes that need to be met in order for somebody to be found guilty of a charge. So right now, the government must have thought that there's probable cause in order to force Mr. Lyon to be facing these charges. And so there's a probable cause standards that's been met up to this point, at least in the opinion of the government. Now, that probable cause standard is going to be tested in front of a judge. And if the judge decides whether or not he or she believes that there's probable cause, then this case goes on, and possibly Mr. Lyon could be facing trial on some very serious charges. Involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice are felonies. They are potentially punishable by prison, and obviously those are very serious if you're the one who's facing the charge.
I see. And, you know, we've been covering this Flint water crisis from the beginning, and we've met families who have become very sick, developing many health conditions off the water. And now someone in the area has died, being 85 years old, and early 80s when the whole water system was changed. So we have the state's chief medical officer being charged with lying to an investigator. How serious of a case is this for the city of Flint, and what kind of proof is needed in order for them to be found guilty?
Well, in a criminal case, in order for anyone to be found guilty, there needs to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest standard that can be applied in any of the courts. The type of evidence that would need to be put forth would, that's what the government has been involved in their investigation. And it's my understanding that the investigation is going to continue. But if they are found guilty of these charges, it certainly is serious. These are, again, these are crimes that are punishable by prison time. Now, there are also much lesser punishments that could be faced even if there were a conviction, but prison certainly is a possibility.
I see. And, you know, recently, back in May, I spoke with a woman who, she said that blue water was coming out of her faucet every morning, and she had to buy her own water bottle to cook everything, to clean everything. And I mean, she also shared various medical conditions that her family had developed from the water. And at that time, she was still paying for the water that she wasn't even using. If you can imagine, many were going to have liens placed on their homes if they didn't pay their bills. But thankfully, a decision was reversed. So the physical and mental harm that the Flint residents have faced are so traumatic. Do you see them being compensated in the future? And what kind of rights do they have?
Well, that's interesting, and it's certainly a different issue than the criminal charges that were brought forward today. The civil, basically what you're raising, the fact that people are going through mental health problems because of all of the stress that they're facing, physical problems, those are all issues that can be dealt with in a civil court. You can file a claim in a civil court and try to get, get your damages paid for through the civil court system. That's a little bit different than the criminal system. In the criminal system, it's just whether or not one person did something that was illegal. In that case, I guess there could be restitution that could be ordered by an independent defendant, but it's just an independent defendant, one person who would be required to pay restitution. And obviously, I think we're talking about a lot more money than one person would be able to cover. So there is the possibility of somebody, or many people for that matter, bringing forth civil suits against either the city of Flint, or I'm sure there's a number of other agencies that are out there that you could try to hold responsible in order to get your damages covered.
Do you see like a class action lawsuit coming of this?
I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that was something that happened at some point.
But it's good to know that if people want to go that route, that they do have the rights to do that.
It's certainly something that can be explored and potentially move forward. You can move forward with that.
And just recapping today, so I mean, as you said, the investigation is still going forward, but possible jail time is a possibility.
It is a possibility. In Michigan, we have maximum penalties that are associated with particular crimes. The crime of involuntary manslaughter is what we call a 15-year felony. That means that somebody theoretically could be incarcerated for up to 15 years. Now, that does not mean that that person, even if convicted, is going to be incarcerated for up to 15 years, but it is a possibility.
I see. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Attorney Sarissa Montague, we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.